Hi, I'm Nalini Haynes, and this is a Dark Magazine vlog and podcast. And today I'm talking to Laurie Frankel, the author of This Is How It Always Is. Laurie Frankel lives in Seattle with her husband, daughter, and border collie. Before becoming a full-time writer, she taught literature, writing, and gender studies at a US university. Her previous novel, The Atlas of Love, has been highly acclaimed. In fact, I think she might have written one since then. This is old. I've just taken it off the web. But anyway, this beautifully written debut offers something for everyone. Humour, richly drawn characters, and a tender exploration of love, friendship, and food. So says the Los Angeles Times magazine. And she's also on the board of a non-profit organisation, Seattle 7 Writers. They're a group of Pacific Northwest authors who work to promote literacy efforts in their community. They teach, raise money, create pocket libraries in shelters, prisons, food banks, and outreach centres, and foster connections between readers, writers, indie booksellers, and librarians. How awesome is that? Welcome, Laurie.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is. It's very awesome, and I'm glad to be here.
Can you tell us a bit about your book? This is the first book of yours that I have read, and I think it is absolutely awesome, and I'm hoping that it wins lots of awards.
Ooh, thank you. Me too. Thank you. I'm glad you liked it. Yes, it's called This Is How It Always Is. It is a story about a family with a secret, and it is a story with a family and a secret and 5 boys, the youngest of whom becomes a girl.
So would you mind reading us a little bit from the story?
I would be happy to. Did you have something in mind?
No, whatever is your favourite bit to do a reading of.
So this is from a chapter called Things They Told Doctors. Claude's first word when he was only 9 months, 1 week, and 3 days old was baloney. There was no mistaking that one. Maybe the cooing ma's and da's and ba's were words, and maybe they weren't. And maybe when he sat in the bathtub slapping the water and saying, wah, 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 he was talking. Or maybe it was just a coincidence. But he said baloney clear as a PA announcer. When had Claude started talking was one of the many questions on the many forms, one of the random facts medical professionals counted as clues. The doctors always looked at Rosie with condescending amusement when she got to the speaking at 9 months part. Then she was forced to have this conversation again. Babies do start babbling around 6 months or even earlier, Mom, the doctors would say. Only a few of them called Pen Dad, but she was always Mom. This must have been covered in the fellowship year if you did peds, because no one, in all her years of training, had ever suggested to her that she call a patient's parent Mom. If anyone had, she would have explained that it's subtext. You know less about your child than I do, for I am a trained professional, and also because, as a woman, you are slightly hysterical, was offensive, untrue, and frankly embarrassing for the physician. The doctors would always continue, the babbling is an important first step, of course, but it's not what we mean when we say speech. Ma and ba don't count. Baloney, said Rosie. No, I'm afraid it's true, said the doctors. In Claude's linguistically formative weeks, meat had been a source of great discord in their household. Rigel was refusing to eat anything but deli. He demanded bologna for breakfast and lunch, roast beef for dinner and dessert, salami for snack. He came home from kindergarten with pictures of corned beef rainbows. His dump trucks and spaceships all delivered ham. To balance this out, Orion ate nothing but carrots and carrot-shaped foods. And though his parents were grateful for the nutritional options thus available in the form of veggie dogs and granola bars with the ends chewed to a taper, this arrangement was not sustainable. The upshot, Penn explained to the doctors, was that a 9-month-old saying baloney was remarkable, yes, but sometimes even the remarkable got lost in the fray. Rosie's point was more this. The normal state of children is nothing remotely resembling normal, which makes it hard to identify the aberrations when they come. Claude said baloney at 9 months, was talking in full sentences before his first birthday. Does he have an older sibling, said the doctors? Oh yeah, said Penn. And they seemed satisfied. But Claude was precocious in other ways, too. He crawled at 6 months, walked at 9. During the year he was 3, Claude wrote and illustrated a series of mysteries in which a poppy and a panda teamed up to solve crimes. He made a birthday cake, 3-tiered, for Rigel and Orion, with no help from anyone except with the oven. He said he wanted to be a chef when he grew up. He also said he wanted to be a cat when he grew up. When he grew up, he said, he wanted to be a chef, a cat, a vet, a dinosaur, a train, a farmer, a recorder player, a scientist, an ice cream cone, a first baseman, or maybe the inventor of a new kind of food that tasted like chocolate ice cream, but nourished like something his mother would say yes to for breakfast. When he grew up, he said, he wanted to be a girl.
Awesome. And that's the beginning of the story about his gender transition to become a girl.
Yes, yes, it's a funny thing to trace the beginning of, but I think that's where it starts. That's at least where it starts to ring for the reader, if not necessarily for him or his parents just yet.
So one of the things that really amazed me about this book, well, okay, there are a number of things. You start out and it's just a normal family, and they're somewhat gross and extremely hilarious boys, and there's all this stuff happening. So it's got real heart as well as the real issues. But then you go into the transgender issues and it feels real, like it could be a biography. And yet you've said it's not. Can you talk about the research that you've done and the intersection of your personal experiences and your writing?
Yeah, for sure. I did a ton of research. I read what there is to read. I met with doctors and I met with parents and I went to conferences. It is also true that my daughter used to be a boy, so I have that live-in perspective. The real difference between the book and my life, I hope, is that the book is not boring, whereas my life is quite boring. It has been a very smooth and wonderful sort of a transition in our household, and that's really exactly how you want your life and exactly how you want things to go for your kid, but not per se how you want your novel to be, because one hopes that novels will be dramatic and heartbreaking and near misses and all of this, and we didn't really have any of that. So all of that is made up. It is also true that I have but the one child, so and I'm one of two, so all of the idea about being in a family with 5 kids seemed like a lot of fun to me, but it's all made up.
Yeah, well, I was a family of 4, and big families are overrated.
Yes, again, I suspect something that is more fun to write about and more fun to read about than actually to live in. Yes.
But it was really interesting because in a sense you normalized Poppy's transition because the other boys all went through issues, and the parents, they had issues too.
Right, yes, and that's where the title comes from, that notion that this is how it always is. And most families don't have a transgender kid, but most families have a kid that is sometimes non-conforming in some ways, and all families have a kid that they don't always know what to do with, and they don't always know how to help, and the particulars vary widely, but the idea of it and the ways that it manifests, I think, are the same across the board. And that's why I wanted those 5 children, even though I don't have 5 children, is because I wanted to look at the ways that it doesn't seem like this is how it always is, but in fact, this is how it always is. And so I wanted to be able to see that play out across as many kids as possible, as I could manage to develop and not write a 3,000-page book.
Yeah, and another thing that came out was all the different options and the reasons for helping children to transition early. Because I'm passionate about social justice, but it really concerns me when I hear about people having irreversible surgery at a young age, because it's like, well, what if they don't want that extreme when they're older? That seems like a really big deal, but you really go into the issues while the parents are agonizing about what to do with Poppy.
Yeah, yes, indeed. I think that for the most part, people are not advocating for kids things that can't be undone later for exactly the reason that you're talking about. And so the medical treatments are of the time buying variety. they're just buying time until kids get old enough to be able to make that decision when they're not too young and when they're not in the throes of it, when they have a little bit more perspective. It's a really difficult thing to ask a kid to do. And it troubles me as well to think about parents making these decisions, essentially people making medical decisions on behalf of other people, which of course one has to do when they're very little. And so the more that can be delayed, it seems like the better things are. Mostly it seems like the more we can say, the way you are is different, but also awesome, the better the world becomes for everyone.
That was a message that came out about, was it Thailand or Taiwan? Sorry, I get the two confused. Thailand. Yeah. The trip to Thailand. Because you talk about ladyboys, like men who have transitioned to women, but they haven't had any bits cut off.
Right.
And
right.
the thing, I don't know how truly accepting their society is, but the way you portray it, it seems to me that that's what we need. We need to have a society where we accept ladyboy as just another gender.
Right. Yes. And all sorts of things in between as well. The notion of moving away from a binary altogether, so that there are lots of different places to land, and it might not be a permanent landing. It might be a skipping around, and all of that is okay and indeed celebrated, and not just on the gender spectrum, but on all of them, all of these identity spectrums. I feel like the more we can get to that place, the happier we will all be, the better the world will be for everyone. So indeed, yeah, that is what I hope too. And I think that Thailand is an interesting example because they are very open-minded on that particular front, but not on all fronts, of course. And so it's not an across-the-board kind of thing, and it would be nice if we could all get wider.
Yeah, with all this, all the contemporary discussion of gender, I found really interesting over the last number of years, and I've become acutely aware of when I fill in a form and it says, male, female, or whatever. It's like so often it's not relevant,
Right. Yes, I do know. Yeah. And all of the information that is collected these days, just in case someone wants it later, which I sort of tend to assume it's in case someone wants to sell it later. And indeed, it's not relevant. And I have more and more started skipping that question, and therefore lots of other questions too that I think, nope, I'm not. I don't answer that. I don't believe in that question anymore.
I suppose I hadn't thought about just skipping the question. I've just had my consciousness erased around the question.
Yeah. Yes, it's very interesting. The universities here are starting on their dormitory forums to ask, rather than having these boxes, these wide ranges of questions, so that in gender, instead of having male and female, it's male and female and 20 other options. And, even though I can only think of 4 or 5 maybe off the top of my head, and that's a good thing. It's a different approach. It's a different way of thinking, and it's a good one.
Well, surely with university you could have segregated and unisex, which would cover everything.
When your consciousness gets raised, you start to ask questions, which is, why are we separating these things anyway? And those are difficult and interesting questions.
Well, I personally wouldn't want to share a room with a guy in college, but, I'd rather share a room with a gay guy than with a lesbian.
Yeah, interesting, right. And that's indeed, like, as soon as you start to explore it and you start to think about it, it becomes a much harder question than it seems on the surface of it.
Yeah. And I hear that I've read that you actually adopted your daughter.
That's true. That's right. I did.
Now, I've read an article where you say that you haven't had the opportunity to tell your story about adoption as often as you'd like. So I would love you to tell your story about adoption now.
Yes. Oh, yes. Awesome. Thanks for that. Indeed, my husband and I debated for a really long time about whether or not we wanted to have children, and the very moment we decided, in just about the next breath, we knew that we wanted to adopt. Adoption is another one of those topics like gender where a lot of assumptions are made, and they're often fraught, and they're often incorrect. And so one of the things that happened to us while we were in the process of adopting was that everyone was sort of sad for us and apologetic because they felt that we must be settling for that choice because of infertility, because we couldn't have our own child. And that made me feel really sad. First of all, because it just simply was not true at all. So far as we know, we are able to get pregnant. And mostly because it seems like a really unfortunate way to go into the process of making a family, which is wonderful and magical and celebrated in most of its incarnations, and then in this little one becomes this tragic, horrible failure thing. And I thought that's really, too bad. That is another one of those things, like the widening of what we call normal, that I think it's not for everyone. But if it were more of an option, if it were more of a reasonable possibility, if it were something we talked about more, then more people would choose it. And it's a wonderful way to make a family for lots and lots of people. And of course, there are lots more kids who need families than have families. And so matching those up with the people who want to be families seems like a win-win situation to me. And indeed, we went to Korea and picked her up and brought her home, and it was amazing and magical and terrifying and sleep deprived and all of those things that you think having a baby will be.
Yes.
Yeah.
And apparently you had labor. Labor was the plane trip home.
Plane trip home was really hard. The plane trip home was hard. The way they do it there is you meet the baby in country, but then you actually have the baby. They gave her to us on the way back to the airport, and then we got on a plane for 15 hours with a child who was 9 months old and had some definite opinions about what she was supposed to be doing at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was not getting on an airplane with two complete strangers and flying for 15 hours. It was a very long flight home, but that too, I think, strikes me as it should be. There is a labor. There is this very difficult part, and there are lots of difficult and challenging parts of parenting. And I think this is how it always is.
Yes, absolutely. Now, back to your books. You've had quite the career. You've published, I think, 2 books already before this.
Third.
Yep. And the first book, The Atlas of Love, has been optioned for television. And your second, Goodbye for Now, has been optioned for film.
Yeah, also true. Yeah.
So, wow. Can you tell me a bit about that?
It's wonderful because it has nothing to do with me. It is the part of this that is not my problem, and that is not my fault. And that's a really wonderful thing. It's very interesting to make something up and then hand over the creative development of it to other people. So it's been really interesting to watch. And of course, it's really interesting to think about, too, and the ways in which you take something that is a textual, that is just in print, that is just in words, and make it into pictures and make it into something that's moving, and give it to a writer, but also a director and also an actor and all of those things. It's fascinating, but it is also very much apart from me, and that's a wonderful thing too.
That sounds great. I've heard a little bit about the process from Wendy Orr, but I haven't interviewed that many authors who've actually gone through the process. So this is amazing.
It is. It's amazing. It's very exciting.
Heading towards wrapping up, can you recommend some books? Like, what are your favourite reads?
Oh gosh, yes. How long do we have? all day long I could recommend books. I read mostly fiction, and because I write fiction, and I try not to let myself read things that I can't have. So when I'm writing in the third person, I'm only reading books in the third person, and that sort of thing. Because otherwise, I also have decision making problems, and I think, oh, that looks fun. We should go do that. So yes, I'm reading all sorts of things. Lauren Grodstein's new book, I'm not sure it's out there yet because it's only just out here, but if it's not, it should be soon. It's called Our Short History, and it's wonderful. Lauren Grodstein is fantastic. I like everything she has written. Danny Shapiro's new book is really amazing. It's called Devotion. It is a memoir, in fact. It is not fiction. I am always recommending We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves, which is Karen Joy Fowler's book, which I loved and have read several times, in fact. David Mitchell, I read everything he writes the minute it comes out. He's a day one for me. Richard Russo was also a day one for me. Ruth Ozeki is everything she writes. The minute it comes out, I own it. And her latest is called A Tale for the Time Being, and I loved it. I could do this all day. Actually, I read serially. I read constantly.
Wow, that's great.
It's nice. It's one of those things that you get when you do this for a living. You get to read all the time and call it work.
Yes. What does the future hold for you?
I've just finished the next book, so the next novel. So that's with my agent right now. It is waiting. I need to revise it, so I'm working on that. And we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens from there. It's an interesting time to be at the very beginning of one book and at the very end of another. So I'm finishing up this one and the tour for this one and talking about it, and that is really wonderful. And it's also interesting to do it at the same time as I'm at the beginning of this other project. And it's not the very beginning; it's drafted, but as these things go, it's still early days, and so that's an exciting place to be. No, I'm so sorry. I'm not talking about it yet, only because I'm very superstitious and I don't want to jinx it, and because my editor hasn't seen it yet or anything. So only people who are married to me have details at this point, so don't feel bad. But I'm not talking about it. It is again, as this one was, about a large and quirky family. But I'm not talking details yet. But call me again in a couple months, and then have me back in a couple years. It'll be done, and I'll be excited to talk about it.
I would love to have you back again. One final question, which is very frivolous.
Oh, good. That's kind.
If in a battle between Ms. Marvel and Wonder Woman, who would win?
Oh, interesting question. My choices were Miss Marple and Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Is that my choice? Oh, I think Miss Marple. I mean, I got to go with the literary choice on that one, I think. That's a tough one, but I'm going with Miss Marple.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for talking to me today, and I would love to have you back in a couple of years.
Yes. Oh, yes. In fact, I hope it doesn't take that long, but it probably will. It's a slow process. Thank you so much for having me. I've been delighted to be here.